In this video I am going to demonstrate how to solve this difficult Killer Sudoku using the method of adding cage values to make it seem like a much easier puzzle to solve. So let's get started. The first thing I like to do is look for cages that only have one or two possible combinations. And in the center of a puzzle there are a few of these together, so let's start there. 23 must be 6, 8 and 9. 3 must be 1 and 2. 6 is 1 and 5 or 2 and 4. And 15 is 6 and 9 or 7 and 8. Now if we look at this cage, we can see that 6 and 9 is not possible because of this cell and this cell would both be 8 if a 15 was 6 and 9. So we can remove 6 and 9. Now we can see that the value 8 must be in this cage, so we can remove it from these two cells. And now we can solve our first cell, which is D7 must be 8. Next, let's look at these two remaining cells in the center box. The values 6, 7, 8 and 9 are already committed, and in this cell we have 1 and 2, and in this cage must also have 1 or 2, so that leaves 3, 4 and 5 for these two cells. Now let's add these two boxes down here. So we'll add these cages plus we solved cell, and that gives a total of 82. That means that the three remaining cells must add up to 8. So now let's fill in this cell here. Being 12, it can be 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 or 9. But now if we remember that these three cells must be 8, we can remove 7, 8 and 9. Now let's add these two boxes in this area. And we will include cells that go just outside that area. Now if we add those up, we get 104. That means the three cells here must add up to 14. These two cells add up to either 7, 8 or 9. So that means here we have 5, 6 or 7. Now we know it can't be 5, so we'll remove 5. And if we look here, one of these two cells must be 3. So that cell here cannot be 7, and so we've solved A3 must be 6 and A4 must be 4. Now let's remove 4 from these two cells, and remembering that those three cells add up to 14, we can remove 4 from here as well. Now if we look at this central box, we can see that the only cage with 4 is this cage here, so it must be 2 and 4, so we remove a 1 and 5. And now we can see that the only cell with 1 is this cell here, so we'll make that 1, and E7 must be 2. Now let's go up to this cell. It can be 3 or 5, but we can see that it can't be 5 because the other two cells would need to add up to 6. And we have this 4 here, and with 5 already used, we can't use 1 and 5. So we can remove 5, this cell becomes 3, this cell becomes 5, and here becomes 5, and we can put a 7 in here. Now earlier we established that these three cells add up to 8, so we can put 1 in here. Now the other two are solved. Next, let's add this box down in the bottom right left corner. If we add these cells, it adds up to 36, which means the other two cells must be 9. So let's put in what that could be. We already have 1 and 2 in this row, so this cell can be 3, 4, 5 or 6. And if we fill in the other cell to make that add up to 9, we get 3, 4, 5 and 6. Now this can't be 3 because the cage adds up to 21, and we can see that 4 and 6 are already used in that column, so that cell becomes 5, and to make it add up to 9 we get 4 in this cell. And then we can make this 3. Now let's look at where 1 can be in this box here. This cage cannot have 1 because it adds up to 26. So the only remaining cell that could be 1 is F8. So let's put 1 in there. Now we have the remaining two cells in this cage must add up to 7, which means it can be 2 and 5 or 3 and 4. And we can see that we already have 2, 4 and 5 in this row, so that must be 3, which leaves 4 for G8. Now next let's look at this cage up here. There's 2 cells left that must add up to 16, so let's put 7 and 9 in there. And if we continue looking at row 6, we can see that the only place for an 8 is this cage here, which needs to add up to 12 in the remaining 2 cells, so that gives us 8 and 4, keeping in mind that there's already a 4 here. Now that with that cell solved, we can put in 2 here and 4. And if we look at row 6 again, we can see that the only cell that can have a 5 is I6, so let's put that in. And still in row 6, the only cell that can be 6 is D6, so let's put 6 and 9 in there. Now if we come over to this cage here, being 12, it can be 3 and 9, 4 and 8, which we've already used 4 in this box, and 5 and 7, and the 5 has already been used. So it must be 3 and 9, and we have 3 and 9 here, so we can solve those 2 cells with 9 and 3. Now let's move up to this cage. There are 2 remaining cells, which must be 15. We have a 6 here, so it must be 7 and 8, and we have an 8 here, so that can be solved. Now moving up to the cage above, there's not many values left in this column, so let's put in what's left, which would be 6 and 7, and it can't be 9. And if we look at this column, we can see that the 3 is already been used, so it must be 7 and 2. Now if we go over here and look where 7 can be in this box, we have a 7 here, we have a 7 in this cage, so that leaves the only remaining cell as D9 is 7. Now if we move across and look at 4, we have a 4 here and a 4 here, which means that the only remaining cell that can be 4 is E9. Let's put in what's possible in this cell, which could be a 1, a 3, 5, and that's all. Now if we look into this box, we can see that 3 and 5 are already being used, so this cell must be 1 and 7. Now next we can now solve these two cells, so that becomes 8 and 7. And if we only have one remaining cell for 7, because we have 7 in this column and in this column, and 7 in this row and this row, which leaves this cell to be 7. Now let's look at this cage here. We can see that there's a 5 here, a 5 in this row, and there's a 5 in this column, which means that a 5 must be in this cage. So that is 5 and 9. And we also have a 9 in this column, so we can solve both of these cells as 5 and 9. If we look at row 7, there are only two values unused. They are 6 and 9. And we can see we've already used 9 in that box, so H7 becomes 6, and B7 is 9, and B8 is 6. Now if we look in this box, there are only two values unused again. They are 6 and 9, and 6 is already in that row, so that means that cell is 9, and F9 is 6. That relieves only one value unused in column F, so F1 equals 9. G1, we have a similar thing, only one value left, so G1 equals 6. We can now solve this cage here. The two remaining cells must be 1 and 2, and we already have 1 in that column, so that becomes 2 and 1. And there's only one value unused in that box, which means I4 becomes 6. Now if we look at row 5 and the value 6, we can see we have a 6 here, 6 in this column, which leaves this cell C5 as any cell that can be 6 in that row. And that gives us C4 must be 2. Now there's only one value unused in this row, so B4 must be 1. And we have two values left in row 5, which are 5 and 8. And we already have a 5 in column A, so we can put 8 in there and 5 in B5. Now let's move up here. If we look at where we have a possible 6, we have a 6 here, a 6 in this row, and a 6 in this column, which leaves E2 as the only possible cell for 6. And that gives us a value for D2. Now if we look at column D, there's only two values left unused. They are 1 and 2, and we already have a 1 here in row 3, so we can put a 2 in there and a 1 in D1. Now if we look at, this is something we could have done before, 9 is solved here, so B6 is 7 and A6 is 9. And if we look at where 7 can be, we have a 7 in this row, a 7 in this row, a 7 in column C, a 7 in column B, so A1 must be 7. Now we'll do the same thing for 2. We have a 2 in row 3, a 2 in row 2, and a 2 in column C. So B1 must be 2, and that gives us the solution for A2, which would be 3. Now, if we look at the value 4, we can see we have a 4 here, a 4 here, and a 4 in this row, which gives us B3 must be 4. Now in column B, we only have 2 values left unused. They are 3 and 8, and we already have a 3 in this box, so we can put an 8 there and a 3 down in B9. Going back up to this box, we have a 1 in row 1 and a 1 in row 3, which leaves C2 as the last, any cell that can be 1. And now we only have 2 values left unused in this box, which are 5 and 9. And we have a 9 up here in this row, so C1 is 5 and C3 is 9. And we can now solve this cell because it's the last cell in that cage, so that must equal 3. Now if we look at column E, there is only 1 value left unused, so we can put a 5 in there. Row 3 only has 1 value left unused, so we'll put that in to I3. Row 1 has 2 values left unused. They are 4 and 8. And we already have a 4 in this column, so we'll make H1 8 and I1 4. Row 2, the only 2 values left unused are 5 and 9. And we already have a 9 in column H, so we can put in 5 and 9. Now in column H there's only 1 value left unused, so we'll slot that into H8. If we go over to column C, there's only 1 value left unused again, so we'll put C9 equals 8. Back over to column I, there's only 2 values unused, which are 2 and 8. And we already have an 8 along the bottom row, so we can make I9 equal 2 and I8 is 9. And we only have 1 remaining value in the last 2 rows, so we can make A8 equals 2, A9 equals 1, and that's our puzzle solved. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, put them in the comments and I will do my best to try to answer them. I've put a link in the description to the website where this puzzle came from, and I can highly recommend having a look. There's new puzzles every day, ranging from easy to difficult.